Welcome back to the Batty Girls Book Club and to our spoiler episode. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Stephanie.
And today's episode is for our listeners who have read the whole series. Yes, every book, all 5, from ACOTAR, so A Court of Thorns and Roses, to A Court of Silver Flames.
We are so excited to be able to talk about how it felt rereading this series, already having the knowledge of what happens in the remaining books. For today, we will be talking about the bits of foreshadowing that we picked up on in book 1 as it pertains to the rest of the series. But again, we will be referencing all 5 books in this episode. Now is your time to leave, Julia and Caitlin, if you have not finished A Court of Silver Flames.
First, I have to say, rereading this book was a whole different experience, and I think I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. And one thing that was so hard to not blurt out the whole first episode, yes, I'm screaming, was my distaste for Tamlin and my love for Rhys, pretending we didn't know how much we would love this man, Rhys, was probably the hardest part of doing the first episode spoiler-free.
Yes, I would like to publicly and personally apologize to anyone who had to listen to us talk about our guy Tamlin in episode 1. We didn't mean it, but we were trying to be spoiler-free. We are Rhys stans on this account.
We are not Team Tamlin.
We are not.
We are not.
But secondly, yes, I have to agree. I feel like being able to reread this book for the second time, I picked up on so many more things.
I think that seeing the red flags, specifically in relation to Tamlin and his control and his selfishness when it comes to his relationship with Farah, I did not pick that up the first time. I was kind of Team Tamlin. I definitely was the first read, but the reread, I sure wasn't.
I actually think, before we even get into foreshadowing and whatnot, tell me your thoughts on Tamlin hate that you see on social media. I have this internal debate with myself on, I think just from talking to other people about the book and hearing different perspectives, I do not like Tamlin. Mm-hmm. Okay, right? I'm not saying that I like that man, that I want him for Farah, but I also do not feel like he should be. I would be game for a redemption arc for Tamlin. I feel like the beginning of A Court of Mist and Fury, I felt bad for him. Yeah. He did not deserve to just be left high and dry. I feel like his intentions were in the right spot. He just had a terrible way of executing on them.
Fair. I do agree with that. And as much as I joke about, Tamlin, we don't like Tamlin, and all the names that we call Tamlin behind his back, I am a sucker for a redemption arc. I would love a redemption arc, and I don't mean that I want him to be with Farah by any means, or really any of the characters that I like in the book.
Yeah, we'll talk Tamlin and the evolution of his character in the remaining books.
But I think for a good chunk of our episode today, we cannot ignore the fact that there were so many hints about the bond between Rhys and Farah in book 1. I think the biggest and the most obvious one is when the Suriel tells Farah to stay with the High Lord. When I found out about the bond between Rhys and Farah, I kind of had this light bulb of like, oh, duh, it was talking about Rhys. But then I was like, but wait, maybe it was talking about Tamlin because she needed to stay with Tamlin to break the curse. So in A Court of Wings and Ruin, the Suriel says, quote, I told you to stay with the High Lord and you did.
I think I have mixed feelings on this because I also, once I figured out that her and Rhys had this meeting bond and she ends up staying with him and writes Tamlin a cute note like, I'm fine, I left on my own will, bye. I was like, oh, cute. Like maybe that's what the Suriel meant. But I think in relation to the first book, it does make sense that the Suriel told her to stay with the High Lord and all will be right-end. I think that was the key phrase that led me to believe that the Suriel was talking about Tamlin, and that was the only way to fix the blight, fix the problems of Prythian, the only way to be Amarantha. That's how I viewed it.
Yeah, but I think that was one of our really big ones. Then in chapter 20 of ACOTAR, this is during Callan May, Farah disregards Tamlin's order to stay in her room, and she recalls there being a string that's tied to her gut that is pulling her towards the hills. And as we know, when she gets to Calanmay, she's searching around and she finds Rhys, who we don't know is Rhys at the time, but now we know. And he does his infamous quote, "There you are, I've been looking for you."
Where are all my Taylor Swift fans? Because reading this line, my first thought is her song Invisible String. I love it. It's so sweet. It perfectly sums up this whole feeling that they're having, in my opinion. I love it.
So we have our infamous Rhys quote that "There you are, I've been looking for you." And then when we get to chapter 54 in A Court of Mist and Fury, this is the chapter, if you know, you know. Like this is the chapter.
The chapter.
Yes, and the one main thing that happens in this chapter is when Rhys starts explaining more about the bond to Farah, and so we learn a little bit more about that quote that he said in ACOTAR, "There you are, I've been waiting for you." So I took bits and pieces of, he had a very, very long conversation with her, but bits and pieces. He says that 3 years ago, he began to have these dreams. At first, they were glimpses, as if he were staring through someone else's eyes, that he thought nothing of them until one of the images was of a beautiful human hand, aka Farah's, and this hand was holding a brush. She was painting flowers on a table. And then at that time, Rhys had pushed a thought back through the bond, and he pushed an image of the night sky, aka Valeris. He said that he saw her through her dreams, and he hoarded the images, sorting through them over and over again, trying to place where you were, who you were. But then one night, you dreamed of standing amongst the green hills, seeing unlit bonfires for Calanmay. And he knew there was only one celebration that large. He knew the hills, and he knew that she would probably be there, which is how he ended up at Calanmay. He smelled her, he tracked her scent, and there you were. I have been looking for you. And I think, like, my aha moment was, he actually wasn't lying about this. When I first read it, I thought he was trying to be protective and saying, like, "Oh yeah, I've been looking for you." You know how, you know, like, if your friend's got your back, like, "Oh girl, someone's on the phone for you." Like, I thought he was just trying to be protective, but
I think
literally was looking
I
for
think
her.
we were supposed to think that too. Yes.
Yes.
In my opinion, that was a little Easter egg that SJM was giving us, and we didn't know until we knew. So you mentioned that Rhys saw a beautiful hand, Farah's hand, painting. Other things that she painted that I really enjoyed rereading, because I was like, "Ooh, this makes sense." She painted the dresser drawers in her house that her and her sister shared. So there was 3 of them. She painted one as flowers for Elaine. She painted a crackling fire on Nesta's, and she painted the night sky on her own. Okay, this makes sense. She ends up being the high freaking lady of the night court. Thank you. Yes, this is amazing. Nesta, silver flames, say no more, crackling fire. It makes sense. A literal spitfire, if you will. And then flowers on Elaine. I think this is going to be bigger than just her love of gardening. And we can talk more about this soon when we chat about theories.
Woohoo! I'm so excited. The mating bond for Farah and Rhys in ACOTAR is often described as a thread that's pulling Farah in a certain direction. So in chapter 46 of ACOTAR, Farah says that she was pulled from sleep by something tugging at her middle, a thread deep inside. And this is similar to the quote that I was reading before when she was pulled to Calanmay. This specific night, when she's pulled from her sleep, she wakes to find Rhys, and he wants to say goodbye. This is after they kill Amarantha under the mountain. Rhys wants to say goodbye, but he also says that he didn't want Farah to fight alone or die alone, which reminds me of exactly what Farah said to Tamlin when Tamlin had found the fairy and the fairy died in the foyer. And he was like, "Farah, why do you want to be here for this?" And Farah was just like, "If this were me, I wouldn't want to die alone." And I think this is just proof that Rhys has been with Farah a lot longer than Farah knew.
And we're getting glimpses of this, like, sweet, compassionate side of him that we don't really know yet, because the whole first part of the book is painting the Night Court and Rhys as this, like, horrible monster. And he is actually the person that shows up for Farah. And I also want to call that out because he shows up for her even when she's puking her guts out from bad dreams in the beginning of A Quartermass and Fury, anytime she's having these nightmares. And I remember
While Tamlin is sleeping through it.
Thank you. I was going to say, Tamlin literally pretends to be asleep while she is having these horrible nightmares. Some partner, come on. Seriously, like, pat her back, please, something. Like, do something. Help us out. Yeah. Like, care. Be empathetic. And I think our guy Reese is. We love him.
Anyway, so Reese is all sad to leave, and he hits us with another really sad quote, and he says that everything that he loves always has a tendency to be taken. I read this the second time as he's referring to Farah because she's here with Tamlin and he's on his way to say goodbye.
I also thought about his mother at this point too, and how his family was taken away from him. I really felt that as well. His whole court was taken from him. All of his closest friends were taken from him for 50 years while he was under the mountain. Everything he loved was taken from him.
We're gonna have a turnaround.
Yeah,
pretty soon, Reese. We're having
a comeback.
We're
New year, new you.
This next book is Reese's comeback season.
Yeah, we love it. The Green Book, you know. If you know, you know.
But before we can get there, Reese does say goodbye to Farah, and just before he leaves, he has this moment where he kind of has like this really shocked look on his face, and he just kind of turns, jolts, and leaves. And we find out later that this was the bond snapping into place. He says that he waited as long as he could, and then he sent a tug. See, the thread, the tug, the pull. He sent a tug through the bond, and then she came to find him, and for once she looked at him like he was worth something. That makes me so sad.
Same.
Literally ripped my heart out.
Love you, Reese.
He said, when I went to leave you, I think that transforming you into Fae made the bond lock into place permanently. He'd known that it had existed, but it hit him then so strong that he panicked. And he knew if he stayed a second longer, he would damn the consequences and take her with him.
And this also, I remember seeing it from Farah's point of view. She was like, he just kind of stared at me like he went rigid and looked at me all weird. So she also noticed like something was up but didn't know what. And I love that it comes back and it's explained like why was he looking at her so weird before he left. And the fact that he was able to leave when we now know how powerful a mating bond is, the fact that this man could walk away from her shows some freaking restraint. And we know Tamlin didn't have that kind of restraint when it comes to Farah. So props to Reese. Another point for Gryffindor. Tamlin Slytherin. We can go down a whole rabbit hole. I would love to do this sometime.
Oh, we could.
Of who would be in which house.
Tamlin is Draco Malfoy.
Tamlin Slytherin, for sure. Maybe Reese would be like Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff. He's loyal. Loyal. I'm Hufflepuff, so I would love him to be
He's
Hufflepuff.
like, I could see him being like Snape.
Yes. And Farah is Gryffindor 100% because she's like, I will do anything to do the right thing, and I don't care about my own like well-being. I think she is 100% Gryffindor. She's the Harry Potter.
Nesta, Ravenclaw?
Yeah, I could see that. Elaine, definitely Hufflepuff.
Definitely Hufflepuff.
This is so fun.
Then just keep on moving.
What else we got?
In chapter 10 of ACOTAR, Lucian and Farah encounter is it Bog, Bogey, or Bogue?
We gotta know because in the
Boogie.
in the audiobook it says Bog. I noted it as like cranberry bog so that I could remember it, but then the pronunciation guide is telling us otherwise. So your Batty girls are confused.
We're very confused, but please let us know. But they encounter I'm going to say bogey.
You're going to say bogey?
Just to switch it up from episode 1. I'm going to say bogey. Farah distracts herself. She's thinking of a starry, unclouded night sky that's peaceful and glittering and endless, and that keeps her protected from the boggy. The boggy. I'm going to say it a different way every single time. And then also in chapter 18, when Tamlin brings Farah to the Pool of Starlight, she describes the setting that is filling her with both longing and mirth, and that it just seemed right. And I don't know yet, and I don't think this was covered in any of the books, if the Pool of Starlight has any connection to the city of Starlight.
Yeah, like the Sidra, like maybe it's like a little runoff of the Sidra. I would love that. I just have to say that this part of the book and many others where she talks about, you know, starry nights and painting the stars, she is screaming to be in the night court, okay? She is destined to be High Lady. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's chat about our girl Nesta for a minute, because I am Team Nesta all the way. You will see this by the end of the series. I am Nesta 100%. I love Farah, don't get me wrong, and I'm interested to see if the reread makes me love Farah even more or pushes me to Team Nesta. But I'm Team Nesta. I think they're on the same team, but I just love Nesta so much. And I could not help but fixate on the part in chapter 3 where Farah mentions how impressive it is to watch Nesta go ramrod straight in front of the children of the blessed. And she specifically says she is like a queen without her throne. I have some theories around this. This is going to come back. I think Nesta could end up being the queen of Prithian.
I could see that.
The fact that she wasn't able to be glamored, everything that happened when she was put in the cauldron, how she took from the cauldron, she is different. She is made different. She is meant to be different. Aside, I had another theory the other day where I was thinking about, okay, if Nesta was actually born different and she's made from something else, I'm like, what if she was already like part Fae or something? Like, what if her mom... Like, what if her dad's not her real dad because her mom loved parties and was a party girl, and then her dad and her never had a good relationship?
Danny, you have raised a great point. Our
Thank
friend
you.
Sarah has shared a theory with us. I haven't heard it before, probably because I was avoiding spoilers. The broke bargain theory. And what she's saying is that maybe Mama Archeron was a fae of some kind and made a bargain for whatever reason, maybe to be with Papa Archeron, we don't know. And the reason that she died and then conveniently fell into poverty after she passed was because their mother broke said bargain.
Yes.
Also, Amarantha comments on Farah's name, saying that it was of Old Fae language. I didn't pick up on that, and I think that's really interesting. And then jumping the gun all the way to the last book, how the heck else was Papa Archeron able to get the Nina, the Pinta,
and the Santa freaking Maria? Yes, I am subscribed to this. I was thinking about this at length. Like, okay, I don't think her mom just died of typhoid or whatever sickness. I think that there was something bigger there. She explains multiple times that her mother was cold towards them. She only really seemed to like love her father. Potentially, maybe they had a mating bond or some sort of bond beyond the marriage. And I think that her mom was born Fae, half Fae, something along the lines. The fact that her father knew about what was going on in Prithian and was trying to work with the queen. Like, how would he know that? Yes, he was a merchant and sailed and this and that, but he's just been like crumpled in poverty for so long. It doesn't seem like he would know that unless previous to his life as a family man, father, there was something else going on. He knows more than we think he knows.
And I'm very, very curious to see what happens as the next books come out. But I think as this ties into what we were talking about before with Farah and Rhys's mating bond, well, we said, how could Rhys have a mating bond with Farah if she's human? Maybe
she's not fully human.
But then how do we explain what happened under the mountain? I don't know. I'm going to leave that part up to SJM.
I think, though, that when you're half Fae, like, you can still die, if I'm thinking correctly. So that would make sense that she would have still died from Amarantha.
But she's referred to from Amaran as the only one other human has been made Fae. So if she was half Fae.
In summary, I don't think Nesta is was ever 100% just human. I really don't. And if she was, then she was a human destined to be more because of all of the qualities that make her such a terrifying high fae.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she was powerful from the start.
I agree, but I am very much so into the thought of Nesta being Queen of Prythian. I would love that.
Me too.
I would love that.
Queen Nesta. Okay, so one other thing that I noticed in the reread, which was actually pretty early on, that I absolutely loved, highlighted, underlined, freaked out about, was when Farah is thinking about how to get this beast away from her family. She realizes that she has to go with Tamlin, aka the beast, to Prythian. We know that. She is really hoping to escape the treaty someday. We know she's trying to get away from him from the start. And she specifically says in her mind, even if she breaks the treaty, as long as the fairies can't find her, they can't hold her to it. Even if that makes her a cursed oath breaker. This was like the first thing I caught on to in my reread that had me freaking out, because we know, hello, Farah Cursebreaker, that's her nickname.
I love this reference because I feel like she goes from being just a normal girl in the Mortal Lands, and then she goes to Prythian, she fights this battle under the mountain, and she becomes such a high respected person, and I just love that turn of events for her.
Yes, and everyone refers to her as Farah Cursebreaker.
Yes.
She broke the 49-50-year curse that Amarantha placed on their lands. She's Farah Cursebreaker. So I absolutely love that little Easter egg that she gave us. Another thing that I absolutely love, we were speaking about how we really want Nesta to be Queen of Prythian, but we can also talk about the other royalties, the High Lords, and now High Ladies, as we know. So in chapter 9, Farah's racking her brain. She knows that Prythian's ruled by 7 High Lords, and she keeps hearing about the she that we know as Amarantha. So in her mind, she's like, oh, well, maybe she's a High Lady, except that's not possible because Tam Tam shoots her down. He's like, there are no High Ladies here.
And also, before, I don't know if it was before they were going to get married or just as she was talking to Tamlin, but she asked what her title would be, or
Yes.
and he said, well, there's no such thing as, he explicitly said there's no such thing as a High Lady. And when Farah talks to Rhys about this, he's just like, says who? Like, okay, like, do your thing, girl. Pop off. You want to be High Lady?
Yes.
That's fine. You can be whatever
He
the heck you
basically
want to
says, we'll talk about that later or something. Like he specifically says, like, oh, we'll get into that later because it is possible. And lo and behold, Farah becomes the first High Lady of the Night Court. Another piece of, maybe not foreshadowing, but just some language and situations that alluded to Tamlin having a big bad anger issue, like raging beast, is that when Farah and Lucian talk about Tamlin going out and hunting the bog, the bogey, whatever you want to call it, Farah asks, like, oh, well, why can't we help him? And Lucian's like, oh, well, he'll basically like shred anyone that, offers him help. He can handle it himself. So there's some of this language that's used around Tamlin where I think people are a little bit scared of him. Like, they're a little bit nervous. He can transform into this beast mode. And then we see when Farah and him are in the study and he freaking shatters everything around her, and it's terrifying. Like, he has some serious anger issues. One theory that I love related to this was talking about how we know when they were cursed by Amarantha, she took some of the High Lord's powers. So Tamlin wasn't able to use all of his powers. He wasn't running at 100%. And I know that Rhys speaks about how later in the series, when he can't use his power to do all of these like behind the scene things, he'll basically like go crazy. Like, he needs to be like constantly pushing out his power, doing different things, glamoring different things.
He gets the zoomies.
Yeah, he gets the zoomies. Like, he's gonna go crazy. And so maybe this is just a little plug towards Tamlin not being that off. I'm not saying he should have raged the way he did and put Farah in danger, but maybe some of the temper tantrums that he has could be related to him not being able to use his full power and going a little cuckoo because of it. Not an excuse, just maybe an explanation.
Yeah, and I know we touched on this before. Again, to be clear, we're not Tamlin fans, but I would
No.
say that we're also not Tamlin haters. I think the way that he hurt her, inexcusable. We can't justify that behavior. But again, he did have some redemptive qualities, and I think at the heart of who Tamlin is and who he was with Farah is he really did just want what's best for her, and that was consistent, even though he had a really bad way of showing it.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I do think Tamlin wanted what was best for her. However, he did not know what was best for her, and he assumed that he
100%.
did. Whereas Reese actually does, like, I'm not saying he knows what's best for her, but he looks to Farah to see what she needs. He's not just he doesn't make assumptions.
Right.
He knows her and understands her. He doesn't try to assert his own beliefs onto her.
That's because they got that bond.
Yeah, and he's got emotional intelligence that I don't think Tamlin has.
That's why we are the Batty girls and not the Beastie girls.
I love that. I almost look at Farah's relationship with Tamlin. I do think she really loved him, or thought she loved him. I feel like we can all look back at like our first loves, our puppy love, and be like, oh, I was so in love with that. You know, I thought I was so in love with them. And then you get that like mature, actually like healthy love. And you're like, oh, it doesn't mean you weren't in love with the first person. It's just different. And maybe your concept and idea of love was different. So I feel like Farah saying that she was so in love with Tamlin, I don't think she realizes what her capacity for love is until she gets with Reese. And then she's like, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
What was I thinking?
And her prior experiences with Isaac Hale. Okay. So
Isaac Hale.
Not great. Not great. And she also, let's think about her father figure, not really someone who's providing her with love, care.
Yep.
Nothing. He's not taking care of her. So I think it makes sense that the first male who's attractive feeds her.
Like helps her. Yeah, does something for her. And
yeah.
It's so interesting because you would think she would be so against. Well, I guess she kind of is, but she's so independent because she had to be. She didn't have anyone ever providing for her or giving her that like emotional support. And then all of a sudden she gets it and she's like, wow, that's too much. And I feel like Tamlin is so overbearing. And we've all had that experience with the overbearing person where you're like, woo, you just love me a little too much and just got to take a beat, you know, thank you for loving me. But like, you know, give me a breather. And I feel like she gets that with Reese. Like she isn't being smothered.
Okay, just some other observations that we had. Again, shout out to our friend Sarah. She drew some pretty cool parallels between Farah and Amarantha. So if you think about it, Farah basically becomes what Amarantha always wanted, but she never could be. So Amarantha had to steal her power from all of the High Lords, whereas Farah was gifted with their power. Amarantha wanted Tamlin and Reese. Tamlin and Reese wanted Farah. It's interesting how they are complete and polar opposites, but I think there was a little bit of envy in that situation.
Can I also tack on another theory to this that involves Amarantha? So speaking about, you know, Amarantha and how much she wanted Tamlin, one of my favorite TikTok theories that I have seen so far, Hannah from TikTok, shout out to Hannah from TikTok, has a theory where she talks about how Tamlin and Amarantha could be mates, but it's one way. So remember how, Steph, you were talking about in our first episode, you were like, why is she so hell-bent on getting with Tamlin? Like, she is desperate. Okay, maybe.
Interesting.
Maybe that's because there's a bond there. And Tamlin is just like, absolutely not. He is rejecting it. He does not want to be with this like horrible, horrible person. Similar to how Elaine's feeling with Lucien at the time. It would make sense as to why she is so obsessed with him and she just cannot let it go. And she ends up like pulling him under the mountain, controlling him.
That is an interesting theory, and it's not one that I had thought about before. And I wonder how this would tie into the whole masquerade that she throws, and when she has Lucien go and kind of act as like the peacekeeper between the two of them. Like, why is she so hell-bent on Tamlin. That's interesting.
So yeah, I felt that that was a really interesting theory that could explain a little bit about Tamlin and Amarantha and why she was so obsessed with him. But maybe Amarantha also hated Feyre so much because she was trying to get... I don't think it was necessarily just because Feyre was the person who could, you know, ruin her plans for taking over and break the curse. Maybe it was also because Tamlin was getting the feels for Feyre. And maybe Amarantha made the curse because she didn't think Tamlin would find somebody who loved him or love somebody back because he was mated to her or bonded to her. And so she thought he wouldn't be able to find somebody else.
I like this theory. My question, what would be the benefit to that theory being revealed later in the plot? And I guess it's a theory. It doesn't have to be revealed at all.
I don't think there is a benefit to it. I absolutely don't think there is. Because one of the other theories that could have a benefit later relates to Tamlin potentially being mated to somebody else. Shout out to Amelia Adolph on TikTok. Tamlin and Elena's mates. I don't know how I feel about that. Have you thought about that?
I haven't thought about it at all. When you were making the comments about the dresser earlier,
The flowers.
Of course, I was thinking about it, right? But then to me, I was thinking Flowers Lucian, right? Because he is connected to the Spring Court.
That's fair.
I don't want to say that I love the concept of her and Tamlin just because it feels like her sister was...
Oh, yeah, icky.
Right?
I didn't really think about that. Okay,
Yeah.
agree. I wasn't shipping this to begin with just because I think Elaine's too good for Tamlin, obviously. But I actually didn't think about it as like, oh, that would be her sister. Ew. I also struggle with Elaine and who her potential love interest will be because I have a soft spot for Lucian. I really, really love like who Lucian becomes.
Love Lucian.
I absolutely love who he becomes. And I'm like rooting for him on one end. But I can't tell you that I'm not rooting for Asriel and Elaine because I really like that.
I think that I like Asriel and Gwen more than I like Asriel and Elaine.
Correct.
Correct. I love Gwen.
Okay.
I love the way that Gwen very shyly looks at Asriel and all of Silver Flames. But I wouldn't be upset about Asriel and Elaine at all.
Yes. Me either. It would be kind of cute too because it's like, oh, all the best friends are like dating the sisters.
Yeah.
But yes, I do. I really love Gwen. I think I was forgetting about our girl Gwen. And I do think Elaine is kind of warming up to Lucian. But I can't get over the whole flowers thing because it had very significant ties to who Nesta becomes with the Silver Flames and Feyre, the Night Court. And for them, it wasn't just something they liked. Like, it wasn't like, oh, Feyre's was animals because she loves animals, or Nesta's was, you know, something that she liked. It was something that they like that becomes a part of them. So I'm trying to see how Elaine's, maybe it's just innocent, maybe it means nothing, and she just likes flowers, so she painted flowers, but maybe it's something bigger.
No, but that is a good point, right? Like the two paintings for Feyre and Nesta, they are very distinctive, and I can't imagine that Elaine and her flowers is just because, oh, I like gardening, right?
I
think there's
too significant for Feyre's and Nesta's foreshadowing. And I'm like, okay, what? She has a garden? That's all? I mean, that's great.
Yeah. We got our 3 books in Feyre's point of view. We got Nesta's point of view. I do think the next book will be Elaine's point of view.
I hope so. Okay, I'm going to go down another real rabbit hole. Also by Hannah on TikTok, which I would have to go back, fact check, probably reread this section, but there is a theory that relates to Sleeping Beauty, which I kind of like because we know that SJM got a lot of her influence from fairy tales, where there, and I don't know what the significance would be whatsoever if there is any, but there is a theory going around that Feyre was asleep between Calanmai and the summer solstice after she fell asleep under the willow, when she was like, I'm so drowsy and sleep just took me over. And she keeps talking about how it was like the deepest sleep of her life. And then she wakes up and it's like basically the next day is summer solstice. But the timeline of that wouldn't make sense if you actually read through that. So I'm like, what is the significance of that? If she actually was asleep, does it matter? Or was that just like a little plot hole?
I feel like that one I would need to do more digging into. I agree with you. I don't know if I feel like there's enough significance into that. I don't know if I love the timeline of that, but I love the reference to Sleeping Beauty because we know that SJM. Yeah, we know SJM loves her Disney movies.
Me too.
So,
and I just love when like people looking into these stories, not from a way of being like, oh, let's see what the author did wrong, or if she like, you know, misspoke or something, but actually trying to find like what these connections could be, if it was meant to be more significant. I don't think it was, because we read all 5 books and it hasn't come up again, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, oh,
it is.
Girl was sleepy. She was a sleepy girl. Okay, so a perfect little segue into talking about more fairy tales that inspired this book. We all know that SJM had a lot of inspiration from Beauty and the Beast, but I realized there's a lot more than I thought when I was looking at the story of Beauty and the Beast. I actually looked at the story that was published in 1756. That's a very long time ago. And basically in this version, a ruined merchant is forced to move his daughters and sons to a life of poverty in the countryside after his ship is wrecked at sea. I was like, what? Papa
That's
Archeron?
verbatim.
Is it you? I mean, that is spot on. That's some heavy inspo. Okay, so there is no wolf in Beauty and the Beast, but there is still a bargain. So similar to a treaty where the father is coming back from a journey. He needs a place to sleep at night. He stumbles upon this like what looks like an abandoned castle. And when he goes to leave the next day, he's like, I'm going to pick this rose for Belle because she likes flowers, aka Elaine, and deserves it. So the Beast is PO'd that the father, picked a rose and says, you have to stay here forever, basically. You're my prisoner now for picking a rose. Like, okay, so don't go out picking people's flowers because bad things will happen. This is going on a tangent, but basically the Beast makes a bargain and says, send me one of your daughters and I'll let you go. So the father comes home, tells his daughters that one of you needs to go live with the Beast, and he feels really bad about it, but Belle's like, okay, sure, I'll do it, aka Farrah. She's like, yeah, sure, bet, I'll go, no problem. Like, just self-sacrifice left and right. And in Beauty and the Beast, Belle expects to be imprisoned because that was the bargain, and she finds herself living large. She's in luxury, very similar to when Farrah ends up in the Spring Court and finds herself living large as well. And she also tries to get out of the bargain in Beauty and the Beast by saying she misses her family. She wants to go home.
I think also the rose, like, let's talk about the rose from Beauty and the
Thorns
Beast.
and roses.
Right. And, like, I love how SJM, she put her own twist on, Farrah has her quote in A Court of Thorns and Roses, right, about how she says, why would you want to be with me? Like, I'm thorny and blah, blah, blah. And, like, we attribute that to be the reason that that's the title of the book. But I love that it's totally a tie-in to Beauty and the Beast.
Yes. And also, Tamlin literally has a beast form. Like, it is so similar, and I really do enjoy it. And maybe that is some like implicit way of making us love the book even more. Like, it pulled on our heartstrings of all of the Disney movies we grew up with. I feel like that's freaking brilliant. Okay, so I think that's gonna be it for theories for now, although I know there are so many out there, and I'm sure you guys all have a ton that you've heard, seen, or have yourself. Please comment them, DM us on Instagram, like, send them to us. We are dying to know. I think it's really hard looking up theories right now because there's so many spoilers for Crescent City and for the whole SJM universe, and we are trying to steer clear of that because we have not read Crescent City yet. So please be mindful of that. But yeah, any other theories you guys have, we would absolutely love to hear them, and we can totally put them into our episodes and share with everyone else if you'd like. Okay, so wrapping up some of our theories, spoilers, our fun discussion, let's chat about what we loved about this book and what we would rate this book. So, Steph, what is your rating?
Yes. So I loved this book. I'm pretty sure I gave it a 5-star review on Goodreads. No half stars needed here. It was a solid 5-star for me. One of my favorite things about this book was just one, SJM's writing, and that goes for the whole series, but she really had such an incredible way of making me feel like I was literally inside Prithian. I was inside of the book, and I love that. And my favorite quote from this book is from our guy Reese. I can call him our guy without feeling bad. He said, finally, he says, "Be glad of your human heart, Farah. Pity those who don't feel anything at all."
I love that so much. It's so relative to the real world, so I really like that.
Yeah. What do you rate it?
Okay, so I rated this a 5-star as well, as you probably could have guessed. It truly did everything it needed to do. I don't think there was anything missing for me. It kept me engaged. It kept me guessing. And one of my favorite things to read is descriptive narratives. I could vividly picture the places and the people that SJM wrote about. It was like watching a movie in my head. Like, the book truly turned into a whole world, and I can't unsee it. And I was worried rereading and also listening to the audiobooks that it would change how I viewed the world or how I like pictured the characters talking. And it didn't, because the first read was just so ingrained in my head. I will say that this first book was a little bit harder for me to get into. And once I did, I was hooked. But I had just come off of reading Fourth Wing, to all my Fourth Wing lovers out there. And so that one was a bit more fast paced, maybe a little bit less world building and a little bit more action from the beginning. So it did take me a minute to get from that world. As many people know, they probably had a book hangover from that book as well. It took me a minute to get into this, but once I did, I could not put it down.
I'm also convinced that the first book in any type of fantasy genre, the first 100 pages are just always going to be a giant question mark. So if you take that into account, that you're going to be confused for a good majority of book number 1, right? And if you just take that at face value, because you're learning so much. If you take that at face value, 5 stars.
I love that. That's such great advice, especially for people who are mood readers. I'm such a mood reader. So if I can't get into a book, if I'm not vibing with it, I probably am not going to push myself forward. So it is helpful to know that it is worth it. I will say, anyone who has struggled getting into this, please keep going. It is worth it. Every single book has a special place in my heart in this series, and I just can't freaking wait for more to come out.
Anyway, these two girls are feeling way too chatty. It is time for us to cap this episode. We hope that you enjoyed our bonus content. Our next episode, which will come out next Wednesday, February 7th, we will continue our book recaps with A Court of Mist and Fury, which is my favorite book out of the series. So tune in.
And many others, I think.
So for those of you who took time out of your days to listen to us, we love you. We're so thankful and happy that you're here.
If you like what we have to say and want to hear more, hit that follow button on your favorite listening platform so that you never miss an episode. And please leave us a review to help us reach others just like you. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube to see what we get up to at Batty Girls Book Club. Stay batty.